Hi, and welcome to the Lisa Mitchell Show. I am your host, Lisa Mitchell, a body language expert and communications guru, I guess, depending on who you ask. And you are listening or watching the Lisa Mitchell Show right now. And this season is all about powering up your presence. So I've got an amazing lineup of experts that are going to share their experience, their tips, their best practices to help you walk in as your most clued in and confident self in any situation. And today I'm super excited. Sharing the screen with me is the amazing Danielle Ireland. Welcome, Danielle.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for hanging out on the Lisa Mitchell Show today.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here. And I have to actually disclose something. This is my first time being a podcast guest. So thank you.
Wow. Well, I feel honored that I get to have that experience with you. And Danielle and I actually have been in the same space to record an episode of her amazing podcast. Danielle, where can people find your podcast? Because I know when they're done watching and listening to this, they're going to want to go find yours.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to promote it. The podcast is called Don't Cut Your Own Bangs, and the tag, it's the remedy to the I'm alone, I suck, I'm stupid, and everyone else seems to have it figured out but me feelings. And the launch date is August 29th. So I don't know when we're actually going to release this, but if it's post August 29th, you can find it on iTunes. You can also find it, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, there'll be links there. But yeah, it'll be up on iTunes and LinkedIn, and pretty much like you just search my name, it's going to pop up all over the place.
You're going to show up everywhere. Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. We had a really great conversation and so much fun actually that we could have shot like 5 episodes, I think, that day. And then of course I had to have you on mine because I'm like, this is too good to keep to myself. So I love that you have such an interesting background. That you have the formal education piece, the master's from IU in social work, but then tell the audience a little bit about the other side, the performer side.
The performer side. Yes. Yeah. Was it my BC? So yeah, before going back to graduate school and doing what I do now, working as a therapist, pretty much my whole young adult adolescent life up until this big career change, I was doing some type of performing. So I started acting in commercials and doing, small roles and in plays, and when I was 13. And then that just sort of progressed and grew. And then I ended up going to like a theater program, and that was what my undergraduate degree was under, which really triggered some fear and shame when I did decide to go back to grad school, because I was like, I have a theater degree. Like, how do I shift gears here? Figured it out. It worked out. But yeah, and then I worked basically as a ballroom dancer after graduate school, and worked as an instructor and a performer from the time I was 22 till about 27. And yeah.
Okay, so you have found, because I think, for the people that are listening and joining our conversation today, I feel like we're just going to dive right in on this idea. I love how you said that you were able to shift gears. Mm-hmm. And I feel like so many people are in this spot where they know there is a misalignment, and they know that it's dinging their confidence, and that they're not walking into the places and spaces on their, that, during their day or at their work or even with their family. Like they're just not confident. They're not powerful. They're not having the presence that they really want to have. And how did that misalignment show up for you? Like when you were looking to shift gears, what did that feel like for you?
That is such a great question. And I wish what I clung on to for so long was waiting for that like watershed moment where it all became clear to me. And I know that some people have experienced that, but that just wasn't my experience. My experience was more of a slow burn. So it was a progression of little things. And actually, to loosely paraphrase something that Elizabeth Gilbert wrote in her book, Big Magic, every day you spend doing something that doesn't fulfill you or serve you, it feels like you're dying a slow death. And I know that's very heavy-handed for the context of maybe this conversation, but I noticed that the excitement and the allure and the rush of being able to say that I did this fun job, a ballroom dance instructor. It was an ego boost for a long time to be able to walk
Right.
into an environment and be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, me, I'm just a ballroom dance instructor, no big deal. But then that the newness of that, I mean, and I'll be honest, like it was an ego boost. It was fun to say, and it was a fun job to do. There were a lot of things I loved about it. But then once that sort, like if you think of like the bell curve or the progression of a
Yeah.
story, act one, act two, act three, when it became life and it wasn't this new adventure and it wasn't this new exciting thing, it was my life,
Right.
there were elements of that that started to feel more like a grind. And I think that happens likely in any profession, but what I was starting to feel inside was that I'm putting this effort in doing the grind to get better at something that I don't see a future in for myself.
Right.
I didn't see me in 10 to 15 years still loving the same things about this job. I guess like, you know, if we were, you know, talking about Simon Sinek, like I didn't have a clear why. I didn't know
Yeah.
my why. I didn't have a clear mission. There wasn't as much as I loved dancing and as much as I loved doing what I did, it didn't serve a higher purpose for me. And
Right.
when I started exploring, even entertaining the idea that I did want something more, once I started to kind of build that emotional, not necessarily emotional intelligence, but maybe heighten that awareness, I started to feel like a chasm or a space between what I was doing and what could be possible for me to do.
Yeah. So tell me about when you started honoring that realization that, hey, you know what, I'm not being fulfilled by this, and I'm not showing up the way I want to, and there's not an end game for me. Like, did you have resistance around the idea of transition?
Completely, because change is hard, change is scary, and fear generally shuts us down. And I don't need to speak universally, but fear shuts me down. I was joking with someone over the process of like learning how to do my own podcast, and you know, it doesn't matter how many times you experience change, go through learning something new. My cycle is usually like I'll get really excited and motivated, so it'll give me this huge jolt of energy, like I can do it, and then that initial adrenaline wears off, and I get really tired and crash and need to take a nap, and then I procrastinate for
Right.
however long. Let's say for an afternoon. So I circle around whatever it is I think I need to do for half a day, and then I finally tackle it, and then I'm exhausted. And it's sort of like it's not two steps forward, one step back, but it's sort of like one very slow step forward. So
Right.
um, to answer your question, I guess, you know, did I feel resistance around change? I completely did. What's interesting, knowing what I know now and being where I am now and thinking back to this time that we're reflecting on, if I had been told, or if I were able to tell myself then that, you know, it is going to be a lot of work. You are going to have to put a lot in to get where you want to be. Um, but you can figure it out. I think that mentality would have been the right mix of truth and also encouragement. Because I think each time I would hit resistance, like, oh, I don't have all the prerequisites to get into this graduate program, which means I'm going to need to go to school before I can even apply to graduate school. Oh
Right.
my gosh. But then what if I don't get in? And what if I put all this money and time and effort into preparing myself to apply, and then the application process fails? And then that's when I would go watch 3 episodes of Big Bang Theory and like eat Pringles and, you know, stress snack and stress.
Right. Avoid. Yeah. So you powered through the change of resistance.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm assuming that there were probably people that your decision to change course, I'm guessing you made some people uncomfortable. True or false?
um, True. And so there's like a yes and to that.
Yeah.
I'd say that the core people in my life that know me, love me, and support me regardless of what I'm doing, I'd say maybe the less conditional relationships, it really actually didn't surprise any of them that I wanted to go back to school. Like
Really?
my husband, my mother, my closest friends, which is a small handful. Like, you know, I mean, it's a small tribe, this little nugget group that I felt safe to share it with. But to be honest, like my internal process, I probably sat on thinking about what I wanted to do for 6 months before I said anything to anyone. Because I also know my process of change is so delicate that if I felt perceived criticism or judgment, it probably would have shut me down prematurely. And I've learned that through just various attempts in different projects. So I was really selective of when I was ready to share, because, you know, I was completely willing to take a hit, and I was willing for people to criticize it or not understand it. And once I was willing to accept that, I got zero resistance. This is a rare, I shouldn't say rare, but this process I'm describing right now isn't every time I introduce a new idea to someone. It just happened to be this particular one. I think the people that had the most resistance, honestly, were the people that I was not leaving behind, but the dance world, and the people that in that community, because they had, like, me moving on didn't meet their needs. And so part of this sort of the sifting process of, as I get clearer about what it is I want, there are going to be not necessarily relationships, but, you know, some things are going to have to fall off.
Yeah, I've learned that as I have changed and made pivots in my career or my personal life, that the people who throw up the most resistance are the people whose complacency you disturb by showing them that you can change.
Oh, that's
right. So it's the people who are like can either relate to you or are in a similar situation or feel stuck themselves, and they see you do it. And then there's almost like this, damn, now I feel like I have to do something. Why did you have to go change? Because now people know you can change.
Yep.
And now I look like a loser because I'm not changing. You know, like there's this whole weird set of, I don't think competitive's the right word, but I do think that there's like that when you disturb someone's complacency where a parallel can be drawn, those are the people that are the least supportive.
I love when your complacency is disturbed. That needs to be on like a bumper sticker or a shirt. So, Lisa Mitchell Show.
Coming to the merch line soon. Yeah.
This is Lisa Mitchell swag.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, right.
Hey, listen, if Gary Vee can get a shoe line, I can do something.
Maybe like Lisa Mitchell Show chapstick. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I think I just made it inappropriate. I'm just applying my Lisa chapstick. No, you know what's interesting, and again, this is hindsight is a lovely teacher, but in the moment you wish you could have that experience and when you need it. And it's probably easier for me to sit in this space right now and reflect back and say, oh no, I was completely supported.
Right.
But I think if I think about, you know, those peripheral voices, which is really what you're talking about, the people that are more negatively impacted by you.
Right. They're not really a stakeholder in your situation. They're just an observer.
But when I'm facing these types of, when I'm still trying to make these types of changes happen in this place in my life, those peripheral voices, the naysayers, the critics, oh my gosh, they are the loudest. It's like they seem to be screaming almost in your head. And even if it's imagined, like these
right.
You know, I can recreate a whole scenario in my head of a girl that didn't like me in middle school, and now she's an adult and telling me I'm an idiot and telling me like, who do you think you are? And who do you think you are? That's
right. Imposter syndrome, isn't that a bitch? Like, who are you to have this voice? Who are you to do this work? Who are you to help these people? Who are you to create this program?
Yeah, who are you to think that you are qualified to do anything? And that was a tough one, because at the time when I was thinking it, I wasn't qualified. So I was trying to get myself the credentials I needed to be, but like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
That's gonna take you seriously.
So let's sit there for a minute, because like this isn't unique to you and I. Right?
I have the monopoly on this.
I mean, you're very special and unique. Yes. This particular feeling is not special or unique to you and I. So how did you, okay, when you get, because I know there are certain things that trigger my insecurities and trigger my imposter syndrome and really, do I belong here? Am I part of this? You know, like all of that, even as recently as last week, like just a conversation and somebody made kind of an offhand comment and it just sunk me, just instantly sunk me. And I'm still trying to process through it in a good way. So how do you, when the, who are you to say this, or who are you to pursue this? Like when that really rages loudly, like what's your, like, share, you know, with the audience, what are some methods that have worked for you to kind of quiet those voices down?
So I think something that has served me well personally, with moments like that is I try to not keep my shame a secret when it's triggered, because that's, and this is part of Brene Brown's literature, but shame thrives in secrecy. And the
Right.
story that shame tries to tell you, if anyone knows this, if anyone hears about this, they're going to leave you, reject you, or your whole life's going to fall apart and burn around you.
Right.
Um, and so there's a couple of specific examples that are popping up in my mind, and so I try to get curious, ask questions, get clarity, and those all involve speaking it. Those all involve vocalizing it. So for example, like the one that's coming to mind, it was the first week of grad school. We were asked to select a particular book, a reading, and then we were going to get in these discussion groups and talk about it. And they all had to do with different like social work topics. Some had to do with poverty, some had to do with race, some had to do with LGBTQ. Like they were just different. I think one was like mental health, but they all had these different themes. And in the group I was in, we were just kind of passionately discussing a particular
Yeah.
topic, and I spoke without thinking, and I said something, I don't remember exactly what led up to it, but the phrase I used was sexual preference, and I got slammed so hard with a handful. And now to be fair to the people in this group, I felt like I got slammed hard. It may
Right.
not have been that may not have been everyone's perception, but in that moment it was for
Right.
me.
That's what it felt like to you.
And there was a major course correction. They were like, you prefer cream in your coffee, you don't prefer an orientation, like, and just so and so I got schooled
Right.
real like the first day. And the narrative that I was starting to write in my head was that this was my legacy. This was going to be my legacy for the next 2 years.
Mm.
This is what people thought of me. Here I am, this ignorant, ill-informed, just all it just all started to go. And I was starting to internally sink in, and I felt it happening. And generally, like my body does this really, really lovely, gives me a lovely signal that my shame is triggered, and it's stress sweat. So
Oh,
like I'm just like, sweating, upper lip sweating. It's happening. And because I've practiced shame enough in my life, I knew
right.
what was happening.
Right.
So I vocalized it. I mean, I had to take a breath, right? You can't, then you'll word vomit if you're not careful.
Right.
But I thanked the people that were informing me for the lesson. I got curious about how those words that I used made them feel, tried asking them more questions. And once I started to open up a dialogue as opposed to keeping it in, and really try to understand them better rather than make that moment about me, it started to kind of alleviate some of the adrenal fire going on in my brain. And then later on in the day, when I had a little bit more time to sit with it, I also pulled in my safe unconditional relationships, and again got even more curious about that moment with them.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever had an experience like this? Have you ever used these words before? How did you handle it? And what I have to be super mindful of, because when my shame is triggered, I will either default to criticism. So if I'm not careful, I'll default to, they were just being sensitive. They were just blah. They were looking for a reason to attack
Right.
me. Like I'll want to defend myself, which
Right.
that's not a flattering, that's not an attractive look on me.
No, but I think it's like such a natural response though, is that when you don't know how to process something, you just want it further away from you. So you
Right, right. And it's about
yeah,
them, not about me.
right.
So yeah, and I know that about myself too. So I'll default to criticism, or I'll retreat, and I'll just get real quiet and I'll hold it in. Or I'll get victimy and whiny, like, which that's not sexy.
Not a good look for anybody. No.
No, but I'll be like, I just don't understand. Like, I was just trying to have a conversation. Like, if you have to say I was just,
right,
you have to qualify any statement with a just, you're probably trying to cover for something. So yeah, just getting clear, getting curious, asking questions and talking about it, that has helped me. And of course, like, under the umbrella of authenticity, because, you know, again, it's so easy to want to default into defensiveness or criticism. So, but that gets me through. I mean, again, I don't want to say that's a recipe for every time, but it has yet to fail me.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, you know, just again, for those of you listening or watching right now, I think it's just such a great system or framework for when you have those moments where imposter syndrome sneaks up, or someone corrects you, or you're just feeling insecure or a little triggered, to not keep your shame a secret, to speak it out loud in a safe space, to get curious, to ask questions, and to gain clarity. Like, I feel like following that process would really take the crazy down in most of us, you know, and I use the term crazy in air quotes, but just that spinning space where we get stuck, or we get afraid, or we get less than, or we start questioning worth. And I know one area that, you know, myself and pretty much everyone I know has kind of been in this space around those feelings triggered by social media. Mm-hmm. And I love the work that you're doing around having healthy boundaries around social media and technology, because there are few places that I can feel less than quicker than on Instagram. Right?
Yep.
And I'm like an educated professional, you know, good-hearted person who seemingly has my life pretty much on track, and I can just feel like nothing in 20 seconds or less. Why does it have this power? Like, why does it have this power?
That's why that's a great question. So I think with social media, what makes it unique in its pull on us, and the way that we can kind of just have we create a whole narrative off of one image. And it kind of goes back to that old expression that a picture says 1,000, or a picture something with 1,000 words. I'm not getting this right.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So if you take Instagram, for example, so you can hear about or read about, like, for me, it's yoga bloggers. So it's travel bloggers who do yoga on beaches. That's what triggers my worth. They have a six-pack, they're doing a handstand in Bali. They probably just swam with dolphins. They're killing it. And I'm in my office and it's cold and it sucks and blah. So, but I see an image of a young woman, athletic young woman, doing a handstand at sunset. And now I have a whole story. I have constructed a story about her life, how great her life is, how, you know, like, she probably just had great, like, sex on the beach, and she's drinking a raw coconut, and she, you know what I mean? Like, I just go places. Like, this whole narrative.
You just created this incredibly fabulous life for her off of a single image.
Right. And then that's where I think that, you know, something that's really hit the zeitgeist, it's like, you know, your highlight reel compared, like, or my pain compared to your highlight reel. I don't actually think it's just the highlight reel, but I think it's the narrative that we slap on to these images. Like, this, you know, fictitious person that I'm talking about right now, they didn't write, like, just had hot sex, drinking a coconut. Like, I'm adding that. And so, to your question of why does it make us feel this way, you know, we're smart, we're savvy, we understand, we know how filters work. We have all used, you know, we understand how filters work on phone. We understand Photoshop. We understand lighting. We understand that was probably the 10th selfie that they actually posted, not the first one. Like, we get that. But it's it's not a logical process. Social media is actually an emotional one because of the story element. It's the same. It pulls us the same way. Like, we watch a movie and we know there's camera crew lighting, we know that that's actually Sandra Bullock playing this particular character, but then we get hooked into the narrative and now we're on this journey, even though we know it's fake. One of my favorite things to do after I watch movies is actually watch the behind the scenes. I love watching the behind the scenes and the sets and the camera. Like, I get it. I know it's all fake, but
Right.
for that 2 hours and 15 minutes or however long it is, I am involved in the story. And I think that what's a little bit harder for us to kind of sift and parse through is where our story meets this narrative on social media.
Yeah, I think it's hard, and I, recently kind of just took a break. I'm like, I'll proactively post content that's work related, but as far as scrolling and as far as engaging, really, liking, commenting, whatever, and it wasn't a long lasting hiatus. It was about 2 weeks really where I was pretty much completely just off, other than posting my content. And it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got so much time back. I like didn't have those ups and downs of like where I felt, I'm like, oh, I feel so much worse about myself in the world than I did 20 minutes ago. And that was kind of one of those habits that once I stepped away from that, I was, my food choices were better. I was making it to the gym more often. Like, I'm like, wow, that plays a much bigger role in the totality of my health and wellness and well-being. And I don't think that I'm unique in that, right? I feel like if people were really to like assign the proper weight to that, we would really see that there are many, many people in an almost constant state of crisis,
Mm-hmm.
self-inflicted, right?
Well, there's a lot of interesting things that you just kind of, as you were talking just now, there's so many interesting points that you made. And I think what came to mind first was that you identified a boundary for yourself and your relationship with social media. And I think the more that we think of social media less as this sort of like technological entity and more, this is really now a social emotional construct that's an extension of the relationships we have day to day.
Yeah.
And I think we treat social media in terms of how we interact with it like we would almost any other relationship, right? We can't be on call to every friendship, every family member 24/7. And then what the power that social media has is connection, and yet we can participate in this space of social media and feel incredibly alone, isolated, and distant. And I think how that's defined, what that looks like, there's not going to be the perfect 10-step checklist for every single human. That's just not the same. Some people have 15 close friends that they still see every weekend from high school. Some people have 2 best friends they see twice a year. I think so for you, rule of thumb that I'm trying to, not rule of thumb, but maybe like the measuring tool that I'm trying to really hone in and get clearer on, not for just for myself, but for my program and clients I work with, is use that internal instrument. How do you feel?
Yeah.
So it's like at the end of a long day, maybe a couple things didn't go great. You had Chipotle, you're feeling bloated, you kind of like crammed in your lunch, and you have maybe 10 or 15 things you still need to get done before you can really unwind for the day, but you're tired. That's the moment when we default into social media. That's when we're anxious, we're stressed, we're tired, and we want something to switch our mind off. And the issue with that is that social media lights your mind up like a slot machine
Right.
does in Vegas. It does not unwind you. And so, but we default in and we settle, and then we just start to get like sucked down because we already have a narrative in our head, right? That we're already living a story of that day where we're not feeling 100%, not feeling great, feeling maybe a little overwhelmed, maybe, all these different adjectives, right? And then that's when we get in. And then that's when I'm in this place and I see that Insta blogger doing that thing, or like posing next to a brick wall holding peonies. And I'm like, oh, I'm a failure. I'm a failure, you know?
The brick wall
But
reference. That's one I spout out a lot when I'm ranting.
it's just, you know, where are all these brick walls? I live in the same town. I don't know where these are. But so that is, but we have to get clear, and we have to become aware. So I need to be more emotionally aware of so this is not a safe moment for me to probably default to social media. This is when I need to snuggle my dog, drink a glass of water, right? Do something else and not default to, you know, this.
Yeah.
But then there are genuine moments where I will share something in my life that is meaningful to me. And so a great example is I recently, a few weeks ago, saved a small little group of tadpoles that I found on my pool cover that I think we'd had a couple hard rains and there was sitting water. So I scooped them out, saved them, and now they're growing legs and they're becoming little frogs. And this whole journey has been so fun for me. It's totally meaningless, has nothing to do with work, but every time I take a photo and post it, I feel like I'm sharing my excitement of what this meant to me to anyone else who might be interested. And that is so fun. Yeah. And then I love, and I think that's where, and it gives people a little taste of another aspect of me that they otherwise would have never known. Right. And I think that's where social media can have a power for good.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's, if you're using it as escapism, as denial for not processing, which is where I was. And that was really the moment for me where I'm like, okay, this is kind of serious. Like I'm not processing some pretty difficult things because I'm filling that void. Like as soon as I, same goes for binge watching Netflix or, I won't even tell you how many episodes into Gossip Girl I am because apparently I missed the show that came out originally. I'm like, oh my God, I need to stop. Whether it's binge watching. And so that was what I had to be careful that I didn't replace one escapism with another. Right. And so for me, it's just, it's having that awareness of like, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? And how is it serving me? But yeah, it's a pull, man. It's a strong pull to go back into that default behavior.
Well, and to circle back to a point that you had made earlier, or may have even been something that you have reflected in a question, but whenever we default, that we're resisting something uncomfortable. We're resisting an uncomfortable emotion every single time. Because when we're thriving, when we're alive, when the cylinders are firing, when we're, firing, when we're just like clicking and moving, we that feels completely different. We don't even think about, like right now I'm completely engaged in this conversation with you. I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm passionate about what we're talking about. It would feel completely disruptive and really it would be kind of jarring if I just was like, excuse me. And then all of a sudden, like, because I'm connected with you. Now, if I'm a little less engaged, like, so speaking about it, if I'm a little less engaged, I'm tired, I'm a little less interested, I'm thinking of 10 other things, and you're talking and I'm like, yeah, totally. No, I'm listening. That makes total sense. Yeah. Just hold on one second. Sorry. Like, there's a total, so if we're not connected to what we're doing, that default, like we're either overwhelmed, stressed, tired, bored, or we're so anxious thinking we have to do everything at once that we're kind of like, I don't know, like Frogger. We're just like jumping logs. We're not focused. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect analogy. And I'm sure, everyone listening or watching is shaking their head. Yes. Right. And I hope my goal is that anybody who's hearing this will really, do just like Danielle recommended and think about, how do I feel in sitting in that for a moment and figuring out what triggers me to go into this space of where it's not sharing life and having joyful experience. It's suffering by comparison, or it's finding all the reasons why I'm not enough, right? Because that's such a dangerous cycle. And that when you get into that cycle and you carry that feeling and make that decision off of something that you see on social media, that totally deflates your presence. So when you are sitting across from somebody or you're connecting with someone, they're not getting all of you and they're not getting the best of you. And I think that's really kind of the long-term detriment is like, how much are you not getting that you want because you've decided that you're not going to show up fully with your, in your full and best presence in every situation. Because you're going to start getting back what you're putting in, right? And people will start holding back.
Question. I think that's a great question for every human to ask themselves. That's a great question.
Well, we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna let the audience ponder that. I'm sure there's a part 2 coming soon. Because I feel like we barely scratched the surface. But I was like, wait, you're there? I know. Time flies. Gosh darn it. But tell people, because this is just a little taste, you guys. You want to connect with Danielle. You want to listen to her podcast when it launches on August 29th. iTunes, find it. Where else can people connect with you to find out more about your work, follow you to keep up on your tadpole growth? However people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that, Danielle?
Yeah, so on Instagram, so it's Danielle Ireland at d.ireland.d. At Facebook, Danielle Ireland LLC. And all of the links to my podcast will be on just every social media handle that I have. There will be links. There will be links to the podcast. The podcast is called Don't Cut Your Own Bangs. It's hosted on Libsyn. So if you like searching for different, podcasts through the various sites, there's a lot of different routes you could take. But my podcast is hosted on Libsyn.
LYBSYN. Yep.
Thank you.
That's what mine is too.
We're learning here.
Yeah. Hey, this is real life, man. This is figuring it out as you go, right? That's the joy of being a creator. Then you got to figure out where all your stuff is.
Yeah. This is clearly not a flawless process. So thank you. That was great. Find me, follow me, connect with me, because I love this so much. I think this is such a beautiful, I think this type of connection, this is why I love technology. This is what technology helps us do well. So It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to wrap it up with that. As always, you can find all of my stuff at powerbodylanguage.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Lisa Mitchell Indy. But before you pick up your phone and before you engage, ask yourself, how do I feel? And if you're not in a space where you're going to end a scroll session better than you started it, put your phone down, find another way to process, and come back to it when you're in a healthy space. So Danielle, thank you. Your information has been incredible, and I can't wait to hear what the audience thinks.